The Ferro rod, or Swedish fire steel, is one of the simplest yet most reliable modern fire lighting devices. It's one that many of us rely on close to home as well as deep in the wilderness. Wherever you use it though, you need something to catch the spark, and that's the subject of this video. And I'm not going to talk about the very commonly known cotton wool balls and Vaseline or petroleum jelly. I want to take a step further than that and share with you 12 really useful, important, widely distributed, easily available means of using your ferro rod to reliably start a fire. Let's start with some man-made materials that you can carry with you, and the first one is tan paper or wax paper or Tinder card. It comes in packs of 6 like this. This is the card. You've got my hand there for scale, and it can be torn up and used very easily. Works very nicely with matches, lighters, but here we're going to use it with a ferro rod. And the simplest way of using it is just to tear it up so that you've minimized the size of the fuel. You're getting lots of raggy edges that might catch a spark, and this paper contains wax, which gives it a good caloric value as well as a good amount of heat energy that's going to come out of this once you light it. So this is a very simple way of doing it. I'm just tearing it up, and you could do this on your platform underneath your kindling. You tear it up and then you take your ferro rod and drop a nice spark onto it. So far so easy. Now the second way we can use this card is a little bit more sophisticated, and this really helps if we want to move the flame after we've lit the paper. So this could be, say, if we're needing to move the flame underneath a bunch of kindling, or it could be, say, if we're lighting a stove. And I've delaminated the paper, and then I start to scrape up the inside surface while keeping the whole thing as one piece. And this scraping again increases the surface area that might catch a spark. It gives me quite some raggy edges, and it also gives me some initial fuel that my spark is going to catch light, and then the rest should go from there. So a little bit of preparation, as with much of our fire lighting, goes a long way. The idea is we drop a spark into that quite precisely, and away we go. The advantage of this is that we can then move it around if we need to. We can place it further into or under some sticks or into a stove. It just gives me a bit more flexibility to manipulate this and get it exactly where I want it. And also it can pretty much act as a spill, as we might call it now, so I can take it to something else to light it. Whereas if I've just got a pile of ripped up material, I can't do anything with it once it's alight. So those are the two ways that I use wax paper. It's easy to carry, it's low profile, and it works really well. Let's look at some self-lighting barbecue fire lighters now. Clearly these are a bit of an issue on international flights or even internal flights, but you can simply cut those off if you want to carry them in your pack. They're only like safety matches anyway, so you need the striker for them to work, so they're pretty useless really as a fallback. And then you have this flammable material which you can carry with you. It's pretty durable, it'll stay in one piece until you need it. You can wrap that up in a piece of cling film or glad wrap, as some people call it, or in a polythene bag to keep it absolutely dry, because this will take a little bit of moisture, and then when you need it you can break a piece off. And again, it's about increasing the surface area, decreasing the size of the fuel. And we'll use our knife for that. I'm just going to shave off fine shavings from the corner, and again it won't be the whole block. You don't need to do the whole block, just need enough to catch a spark and ignite with some measure of surety, and then enough to light the rest of the block from it. So we get our pile of shavings with a few rough edges, and we're going to drop our spark into that. We can scrape some material in there first if we want to, as we've looked at before, but really a good strong spark into there. If it doesn't go the first time, it may smoulder. It's not quite as flammable as the waxy product that we just looked at. But there we go, that's going. It's really just about catching one of those fine edges, and we can bring some of these other bits together.
catch those fine edges. It's all going there. It takes a little bit longer to catch. It's not quite as flammable and immediately ignited as the other material, but it does burn for a long while. It's a good compact solid way of taking some firelighter with you, and again you can add that block to that and small fuel can be added, and that's going to burn for a long time. There's a lot of energy packed in there.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to some natural materials that we might be able to pick up along the way and use with our ferro rods. The most obvious one is birch bark. Now, I've demonstrated elsewhere, including on YouTube videos, how to push big sparks off of a ferro rod using where the bevel of a knife comes up and meets the spine, and there's a good solid right angle there. But even using that, we are unlikely to light a sheet of birch bark directly. So we need to do something else, and again we are going to increase the chances of catching a spark by preparing the material. You start by taking your sheet of birch bark and scraping the outer surface, taking these laminated layers, those thin layers, and scraping them up. You're creating really fine pieces of material that the spark might catch. You're increasing the number of raggy edges that a spark might be able to attach to and set fire to, and you're generally increasing the surface area of the fuel. And what you want to be doing is scraping a bunch into the center of your sheet. Start on one side, scrape a bunch into the center, turn it around and scrape another bunch from the other side, so you get this ridge of material in the middle that's ideally attached, and that helps particularly when it is breezy. And then you can drop your spark into the middle of that. Those pieces that will light initially are attached to the main sheet that you want to ignite. And if you want to learn how to be really super accurate with this type of sparking method with your ferro rod, make sure you stick around till towards the end of the video where I'll show you a really good way of practicing this. Here's an extra little tip. You can preload what you're dropping a spark into with some material from the ferro rod by scraping it gently and then drop the spark in. That helps in marginal conditions, say when it's really damp, raining, everything's filled with moisture. But birch bark really is one of nature's best firelighting materials. The oil, the betulin in the bark is really very flammable and gives a lot of caloric value to birch bark. Now let's look at another very widespread set of firelighting materials that we can find in nature. Beard lichens, sometimes referred to as old man's beard, are these thin, wispy lichens often growing on trees. They have the advantage that they can catch the sun, they can catch the air, they're often quite dry, and because they're quite fine and fibrous, they also catch sparks quite nicely and are relatively flammable, similar to cotton wool if you like, and they're available year round. You might need to shake the snow off them, but if you can find some that have been a little bit air dried already, that's all to your advantage. Here's some that was drying in my pocket for a day, and it takes a spark really quite nicely, and this is in really quite cold conditions in the north of Sweden. More generally, we can often take them straight off the tree, and if they're not too damp, we can use them directly with minimal processing.
And this is the really good stuff, I think. Here, the really fine, wispy stuff. But you want to tease this out a bit like you tease cotton wool out. If you're doing cotton wool with kids for a kid's sort of introductory fire session, you want to tease it out a little bit just to increase the chances of getting a spark. Okay, let's have a look. That went straight through it. That caught a little bit, but there we go, that's going. And now I need to move that around a little bit, like so. This fire wants to go up. You can see it's quite smoky. It burns quickly though, you can see. There isn't a lot, unlike say birch bark, there's not a lot of heat in there really, heat energy. I mean, it's hot, fire is hot, right? But the point is that there aren't all those oils, there isn't a lot of fuel in there. That's going to burn off quite quickly. So to get a fire going with this, you're going to need a reasonable amount to get your fire going to start off with. So don't underestimate how much you need. You also are going to need some really small, fine sticks, which you're going to find typically where you find this material, spruces, pines, etc. All right, so everything's ready. Let's take a look, see if we can get this spark in here. Nearly. There it goes. First one nearly had it. Second one had it. Haven't put these down, but I want to get that over and make use of this lichen burning as quickly as possible, because it will burn up quick. Yeah, you don't have a lot of opportunity there to really take advantage of it. I've still got these in my hand. I haven't put them down on the ground. Just holding it so I don't squash the lichen too much, because the lichen really needs air to go. That first lot of fuel is going. Fire still back in my pocket. Haven't attached it yet to the lanyard. I can do that in a second, but it is back in my pocket. Next one on.
Okay, let's now move on to another widely distributed natural fire lighter. That is the seeds of cattail, also known as reed mace, bulrush or kumbungi. This is a widely distributed set of plants, and the seed heads look like cigars or corn dogs.
I found a natural corn dog out in the wild. Let's taste it.
These seed heads, when they're mature and ready, are really full of a lot of fluffy seeds, and they're very easy to collect. You can use them directly, you can carry them with you for later, and they're still available in the winter months, which is handy. In fact, it can be easier to get into them in the winter months because these plants like to grow in boggy areas and swampy ground, and that can be frozen in winter, and so it can be easier to get in and collect this stuff, and it's a very readily available resource. There is tons and tons and tons of fluff here, but one of the things is when you drop a spark on it, it does tend to flash through very quickly. So one of my favorite ways of using it is to combine it with another prolific resource that you find in many parts of the world. There's again a number of species here, the bracken ferns or the eagle ferns, and because the tifa flashes through, you want to place the bracken directly on top, ready to go. You can place your kindling on top of that. You drop a spark onto your tifa, it flashes through, it ignites the bracken goes and ignites your kindling. As with using any fluffy material, typically you want to tease it out a little bit just to make sure there's enough air in there and there's enough space for the sparks to catch. And as I say, you want to make sure that your bracken's already in position, because that tifa just flashes through very quickly, and it may take a few goes to get one of those flashes to catch onto the bracken, particularly the bracken's slightly damp, which it can be in the colder months of the year, even with the best will in the world, but it will eventually go, and you might need to manipulate things a little bit as I'm doing here, but it works quite nicely. Then you can put your small sticks on the top, and if you don't have small sticks, then you better have some feather sticks ready prepared to go. And you might be thinking, well, couldn't I just light the feather stick directly? And yes, if you had a match or a lighter, you could, but there are also ways of lighting them directly with sparks, which we're going to look at shortly. But this is just another way of combining different skills in a way that might be useful under certain circumstances. Indeed, we need our fire skills to be robust, resilient and reliable. However we get to that flame initially, we need to make sure that we can always turn that flame into an established fire. That's why I offer an online training called Fire Essentials. It focuses on the core principles that make fire lighting reliable outdoors. Do yourself a favor today, check it out via the link here below or via the QR code. Alright, let's talk about feather sticks in the context of this video. First of all, feather sticks can be useful in circumstances when we can't find any dry kindling or any kindling at all. Then we can manufacture the kindling that we need from the insides of a dead standing piece of wood. It does take some skill to make good feather sticks, but there is value in practicing feather sticks, even in the sense of making your knife skills better. You get very good knife control from making feather sticks. Now, most of the curls that we make on our feather sticks are going to be pretty much the full length of the stick, but then when we get into the context of using sparks, which is the subject of this video, what we can do is make some short curls at the base of the massive curls that we've already produced. Now, these are intentionally short and we're trying to make them as fine as possible. Just little cuts as fine as possible, and we only need to do this on one of the feather sticks. The rest of the feather sticks can just be as we'd normally make them. Then we're going to set our fire platform as per normal. We're going to do a feather stick lay as we normally would make it, and when you've got really good feather sticks they can be hard to get together, but you want the massive curls in the middle. And then we are going to use our ferro rod, not lighters or matches, to light that feather stick that we made with the fine curls. And all we need to do is use that concentrated technique, drop a spark into those fine curls, and away she goes. And then just hold the feather stick up so the flames go up into the rest of the curls, and then you can use that to light the rest of your feather sticks. So in the context of using a ferro rod, we can even use our feather sticks as tinder, so to speak. Now, in another YouTube video, I concentrated on making some quite rough and ready feather sticks from Fatwood and lighting those directly with the ferro rod, and that's very, very effective and a really good way of getting your fire going because of the amount of resin in there compared to regular wood. But here let's look at an even simpler way of using a resin infused pine branch stump like this that we might readily find in the woods. It's really very easy. Here I've already created some wood shavings, and now I'm really concentrating on one end of this stump that is particularly resin infused, and I'm keeping some of the shavings connected together just so I can manipulate them a little bit, and I'm just chopping them off there. Now I'm ready to drop a spark into that and maybe move it if I need to.
Just so you know, I have filed the back of this more. There we go. So I just took a little bit more time to create some nice fine curls off that stuff that was very infused. Made a mini feather stick basically. Dropped a big spark into the middle of it. I can smell the resin coming off it here.
Now I hope it's obvious I wouldn't be lighting a full campfire on top of an old tree stump like this. I'm just using it as a platform to demonstrate the technique of lighting the shavings. But you can see how few shavings I actually need. There's plenty of fatwood left on that branch stump that I had, and I could use that for lighting multiple fires. So this is quite an economical technique.
Nice little ember there.
Now the traditionalists and the purists, if they've got this far in the video, have probably been cursing me all the way. They've probably been throwing things at the screen, because traditionally a tinder is something that will catch and hold a spark. It won't ever turn to flame. Now the problem with modern sparking devices vis-a-vis old flint and steel or even iron pyrites is that a ferro rod will light a lot more materials directly than a flint and steel will, for example, just because the sparks are bigger and hotter. But traditionally with tinders we would have to then take it to flame using, say, a tinder bundle like I'm doing here. Now this isn't the only area where ferro rods blur the boundaries compared to traditional techniques. Let's take a look at the horse's hoof fungus. Horse's hoof fungus, Fomes fomentarius, also has many other common names, is a bracket fungus that is typically found growing on dead or dying birch trees on both sides of the Atlantic, in both North America and in Eurasia. It will also grow on other hardwoods. Most typically though, I've found it growing on birch trees, and it can be a single fruiting body or it can be multiple fruiting bodies on the same tree. It's a slow growing bracket fungus, so you will find it over the winter as well. It has a hard outside crust, and if you tap it, it sounds a little bit like an eggshell. Once you cut into that, and here's a cross section, underneath you have this soft chamois leather or buckskin like trama layer, and below that you have the vertical spore tubes. If you take a slice of that trama layer, that's traditionally what's been used as a tinder. Now traditionally, to make amadou, what was done was this was cut into strips, it was soaked in a lye solution, it was pounded, and then it was dried, and then it would be more receptive of a spark from a flint and steel. But here's where the boundaries get blurred. With a ferro rod you can light this stuff directly directly. You might be able to catch a fluffy edge directly with a spark from a ferro rod, and certainly if you scrape up the material when it's in good condition like this, you drop a spark into it from a ferro rod, it will light directly. You don't need to go through that processing that you would traditionally need to go through to make it receptive to a spark from a flint and steel. So the size and temperature of ferro rod sparks means that this can be used in a less traditional way and more directly, but it still won't burst into flame. You then need to put it into a tinder bundle and blow it to flame as traditionally you would, but you can light it more directly than the traditional methods. Also, as an end note, it's worth observing that this does smoulder for a good long time, so you've got plenty of time to light your tinder bundle, but also you can use it as an ember extender. You can even use Fomes Fermentarius to transfer embers from one place to the other and carry fire. Let's stick with parasitic fungal infections of birch trees for a moment and consider the birch canker that's caused by the fungus Inonotus obliquus, commonly referred to as Chaga or Chaga mushroom. It's not a mushroom at all though, it's not even a fruiting body of the fungus. It causes the wood of the birch tree to grow differently. It can range from a dark grey to an almost black colour on the outside, and when you cut on the inside it's an orangey brown, hard, corky material, very different to what birch wood is normally like. And while Chaga has become prized for its medicinal qualities, what we're interested in here is firelighting, and it can be used as a tinder. And you don't need very much, you just need to shave a little bit off with your knife, a little bit like we did with some of the materials earlier in this video, and then we're going to drop a nice big spark and catch an edge or two of that material, and that will start to smolder. And if you just bring it together so there's a few pieces touching, it will continue to smolder, and it burns for quite a long time, quite slowly, almost like a little smudge fire. And if you blow on it a little bit, you'll start to get some orange parts showing where the oxygen is causing increased combustion. But you can take a lump of this and use that as your little coal to pop into a tinder bundle to blow to flame. So it's another way that we can use a natural material as a tinder, and again it's a very efficient use of this material. You need very little of it to catch the spark in the first place, and then you don't need very much as a little coal to pop into your tinder bundle. They're really quite hot.
So I was being super helpful this morning because this is how Paul lit the fire last night, with these beautiful little lichen. So I've been around and diligently collected all this little lichen, and he's just totally usurped me, and he's like lit a fire just by blowing on old bits of wood. I mean, come on, that's so inconsiderate. I was just trying to play and have a bit of fun. And look at him, he's just blown a fire from nothing.
Well, I didn't quite just blow a fire from nothing. I don't have that level of skill. I'm not a dragon. But what I did do was drop sparks on the dogs from the fire from the night before. And because they were still dry and hadn't taken up too much moisture and the wood was of the right type, I was able to drop a spark on there and get one of them glowing. I could then bring a few pieces together and start creating a flame.
How come Paul's not talking?
I think he's busy. I think it's quite critical right now that he blows, not talks. Look at that, that's amazing. Wow, there's a flame. Get in there. That's awesome.
So if you've already had a fire, another potential recipient of your ferro rod spark are the fire dogs from the night before. And even if you've taught your friends about lichen, then they can still be stumped by you pulling this trick out of the hat in the morning. Let's now have a quick look at a couple of relatively uncommon man-made tinders. First off, wire wool, and I'm dropping a spark in here and setting off an oxidization process just as a battery does. A lot of people think you can only do this with a battery, but we do still need to blow this to flame, and all I'm using here is a paper towel. With a wire wool, I dropped a spray of sparks, but now we're going to go back to dropping one big spark really accurately.
So we can extend that to a candle. It's got a wick down the middle that can be frayed out at the end. You need a reasonable amount sticking out the top, and then basically you're going to sit your candle horizontally with a splayed wick, and you're going to try and drop a spark into there. Now this is quite a good thing to practice, just to get really precise with your sparks. Now the issue I've got here at the moment is that it's a little bit breezy. It's still one moment and then there's a bit of a breeze coming through, so we'll try our best here. It's ideally done in quite a sheltered spot, but I'm going to drop a spark right there. I'm just come around a little bit more, drop a spark right in there, and there we go.
So to reiterate, this exercise has two purposes. One is of direct practical use. You can light a candle directly with your ferro rod. And secondly, in practicing this in your own time, close to home, you get really accurate with dropping a spark, a big spark, exactly where you want to, which is useful for a range of different tinders as well. Now, all of these techniques are useful, but on their own, they don't guarantee success. What really matters is understanding the principles that sit underneath them and having a core foundation so that you can always turn your spark to flame and your flame into established fire. And if you'd like to make your firelighting skills solid and reliable, whatever the weather, I have a short online course called Fire Essentials. It focuses entirely on the core techniques and principles that make the biggest difference in the outdoors. It's designed to give you a strong, dependable foundation so that you can apply that knowledge anywhere. You'll find the link below, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And if you're still deciding which ferro rod to carry, the video on screen coming up next will help you choose one that works well in the field with all the techniques that I've shown in this video. That way you can practice these techniques efficiently and effectively and apply them in the field when you need to. Hope to see you there.